Nuclear power plant accidents and weapon testing are dreadful and cause nothing but death and pain, not to mention an enormous environmental damage. And it's also partly the reason why radiation exposure in some places is higher than in others. So radioactive decay isn't exactly a pleasant process, and it often happens so that humans even somewhat speed it up. The nuclear weapon testing alone is a genuine nightmare. Okay, so today you guys will see the most radioactive places on Earth. During the Cold War period, this polygon belonged to USSR, and it's exactly where the most of the nuclear weapon testing was happening. There were 468 tests in total, and the consequences can still be seen on people who live in the nearby territories. Evidence suggests that over 200,000 people in the region suffer from severe levels of radiation. It turns out that Denver and a big part of Colorado has background radiation higher than in many other places in the US, and it's partly because there's a lot less atmosphere shielding from the cosmic rays, as the city of Denver is stretched 1,609 meters high above the sea level. And the other thing is that the ground is rich with uranium, which produces a radioactive chemical element in a form of gas known as radon. During the Cold War period, Mayak Production Association was one of the biggest nuclear facilities in USSR. Nowadays, the closest city to Mayak is Ozyorsk in Chelyabinsk province. So the most terrible accident happened in 1957 on the 29th of September. This nuclear accident is regarded as the Soviet Union's worst apart from the Chernobyl disaster, and is categorized as level 6 serious accident on the 0 to 7 international nuclear event scale. The total number of victims is unknown, and the whole region is uninhabitable till this day. Established in the 1940s, Sellafield is a nuclear fuel reprocessing site in Seascale in England. So the worst nuclear accident in the history of UK happened in 1957. It's known as the Windscale Fire, and perhaps you already heard how this horrible accident took lives of more than 1,000 people. Those who managed to survive have died of cancer. You can't exactly call the pirates of Somalia reasonable, but at least they're not responsible for dumping toxic waste over their country's coastline. According to the evidence, Somalia is used as a toxic dumping ground of some major Swiss and Italian companies. Those multinational companies use Somalia's main line as a toxic dumping ground. And the aftermath of the dumping is just horrible. And the worst part is that it still seems like no one really gives a shit about those poor people. Also known as the Hanford Project, Hanford site is a former nuclear production complex that used to operate in the state of Washington after the Second World War. It was established in 1943, and its main purpose was to generate the nuclear power for the weapon reproduction purposes. And even though Hanford site is demolished, it seems like the radiation is there to stay for quite a few years to come. This weird incident happened in the center-west state of Brazil in 1987. So the scrap metal collector stole that weird-looking radiotherapy equipment gadget from an abandoned hospital. It was the fact that it had a glowing blue light coming out of it that attracted collectors. So the result of that theft came as a terrible spread of radiation across the wide area of Goiás region. Nobody can forget what happened in March of 2011 in Japan. Fukushima nuclear disaster is the most horrible nuclear catastrophe since Chernobyl disaster. A vast territory has become desolated, and more than 165,000 people were forced to leave their homes. Chernobyl disaster was the worst nuclear catastrophe that has ever happened on our planet. It occurred in 1986 and has affected vast territories across parts of Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. Officially, the most disastrous nuclear power plant accident in history, and caused the death of 56 people. Although, it is believed that a destructive explosion and the following fire took lives of a much larger number of people. Alright, enough disasters for today. If you enjoyed watching this episode, leave a like and feel free to comment. We'll see you next time.